These are 10 cards you should always draft in Tarkir Dragonstorm. Now, always is a bit of a strong word, but let's just say these are fantastic cards that will help you win your games, so you should highly prioritize them during the draft portion. First up is Molten Exhale, which is 1 and a red for a sorcery that deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker, and if you behold a dragon, you can cast it as though it were an instant. This card is fantastic. 2 mana deal 4 means that you will often be able to trade up on mana, which means this can kill 4 or even 5 drops sometimes, and that means that you can play this for 2 mana, deploy something else alongside it in the mid game. You can also have the flexibility to kill something in the early turns if you really have to, because it is just 2 mana, and the fact that you can cast it as an instant sometimes means that you can do all of the tricky shenanigans that instants are known for, like blowing out combat tricks, messing with enchantments or auras and pump spells, and also just being able to hold up mana so that your opponent won't know what to expect and you can kill their creatures by surprise. This card is fantastic and definitely a card you should be taking highly. Next up is Karakik Guardian. This card costs 3 blue, green, red mana, so it's hard to cast, but definitely worth prioritizing because it is a monster. It's a 6/5 flying, vigilance, trample, and importantly, it has hexproof if it hasn't dealt damage yet, which means it's basically impossible to race and is basically always going to at least get to eat something in combat. So the flying vigilance trample means that your opponent can't really block it very profitably in combat because they have to have a giant flyer or reach creature to do so. They aren't going to be able to race it because the vigilance means it can play offense and defense, and they aren't even going to really be able to chump block it because of the trample. The hexproof mode, when it hasn't dealt damage yet, also means that if you are trying to stabilize, your opponent isn't going to be able to just immediately kill this and then attack past it. It is going to at least get to block something in combat, which is really, really great for fending off aggression. And if you've gotten your opponent low, they aren't going to be able to kill it before it does at least 6 damage to them in most cases, which means if you've gotten them to 6 life, this card is going to finish the game very, very easily. This card is fantastic, and even though it's got a lot of colors in it, you should still be taking it early because it is a great, great card. Speaking of big multicolored dragons, Sonic Shrieker is another one that is definitely worth the tricky mana investment. The fact that it's 2 red, white, and black does limit where it can fit into just those decks, but it's a 4/4 flyer that when it enters deals 2 to any target, you gain 2 life, and if a player is dealt damage this way, they discard a card. So oftentimes you'll want to pick off one of their small creatures to enable attacks, but you can also just take out their last card or one of their last cards in hand if they only have a couple left by dealing the 2 damage directly to them. The 2 life means that you can use this to help you in racing situations. So if it's an aggressive versus aggressive matchup, you play this card, you kill one of their small creatures, gain 2 life. That life gain can be absolutely massive. And overall, Sonic Shrieker is again a card worth prioritizing despite the tricky mana cost because it is so good when you get to cast it. Next up is a card that is great against big dragons like the one we've just talked about, Dragon Sniper. It's even in the name. It's a single green mana for a 1/1 with Vigilance, Reach, and Death Touch, which means that it's going to be able to take down those dragons no matter how big they are. Vigilance means it can chip in for damage in the early turns and still be able to play defense. Also relevant in the mid turns, if your opponent only has one of those big dragons that you're happy trading the sniper for, it can still get attacks in. And the most important part is, of course, the reach and death touch, because your opponent is not going to want to trade their big dragon for the card you only spent 1 mana on, which often means they're going to have to spend a removal spell on the dragon sniper, which then leaves them down on mana because there's no way they can kill the dragon sniper and end up with a mana advantage because they're going to have to spend a 2 mana removal spell or a 3 mana removal spell or really any removal spell on the dragon sniper. You're going to be ahead in that mana exchange, and that's going to give you an advantage. Dragon sniper is definitely worth prioritizing in a set that even has dragon in the name. Next is Sibsig Appraiser. This is a really good value blue card at common. For 3 mana, you get a 2/1. When it enters, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand, the other into your graveyard. This just gets you card advantage if you're able to use the 2/1 body in any way to trade for a card. So if you trade this with your opponent's 2/2 creature, you're going to be up a card in the exchange because when it entered, you got to put another card into your hand. You also get some card selection with this, which is nice because it can dig you towards the cards you need. Maybe you have a really good bomb in your deck. This digs you towards that. And sometimes you can even use the fact that you put a card into your graveyard to your advantage because there are cards that get you some value from the graveyard. And so Sibsig Appraiser is good with those as well. Overall, for 3 mana, you're getting a lot of value and you're going to be happy playing this card whenever you get the opportunity. Next is Twin Maw Stormbrood. This card is really powerful in part because of how flexible it is, because if you have red and white mana in your deck, you have access to either 5 and a white for a 5/4 flyer that gains you 5 life when it comes into play, or Charring Bite, which is 1 and a red to deal 5 damage to a creature without flying, and then you shuffle it into your library again. Now, the Charring Bite is definitely the better mode of this card that you're going to be casting more often because it's cheaper and it's really efficient removal, similar to removal we've already discussed. But the fact that you also, if you have access to white mana, gain the ability to cast this 6 mana flyer in the late game, if you draw your Twin Maw Stormbrood in a situation where that would be good, is really, really nice, because in some games, being able to play a 6 mana 5/4 flyer that gains you 5 life is just going to put the nail in your coffin on your aggressive opponents, or just give you a huge threat that can help finish off the game, or really any of those options. So you can oftentimes take this card early and just use it for the Charring Bite mode, so you can play it in a deck that doesn't have access to white mana, but when you have access to both, the card is even better, and it's just a fantastic addition to your decks. Another card in this similar vein that also has this multicolored, Omen off-color, Dragon main color type thing going on is Disruptive Stormbrood. So you have access to either the 5 mana 3/3 flyer in green. When it enters, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment, which can definitely be good, especially if your opponent has some really powerful enchantments or artifacts, so you get a nice little 2-for-1 in the process. Or you gain access to Petty Revenge, which is a 2 mana removal spell, 1 and a black for a sorcery, destroy target creature with power 3 or less, and then you can shuffle that into your library. And it's really interesting because the fact that it just destroys the creature with power 3 or less means that you're often going to be able to kill things that did cost more than 2 or 3 mana, because sometimes they'll just play a big creature that maybe had an ability or that cost a lot of mana, and then, for example, a Disruptive Stormbrood, you can kill sometimes even 5-drops or things like that with the power 3 or less clause. But the fact that you get a nice removal spell for smaller creatures is really, really nice, especially because it only costs 2 mana, so you're oftentimes not going to be trading down on mana, and you're often going to be trading up on mana by killing a 3-drop or something like that. The fact that you can cast either mode if you're in black and green is really, really nice. But again, if you can only cast the removal spell part of this card, you can still put it in your deck. And sometimes if you can only cast the dragon part of this card, you can still put it in your deck, which is just nice upside to have on the card and makes it a high pick. Next is Kishla Skimmer. So this is a blue-green card. It doesn't have any of this weird flexibility. Not weird flexibility, but the flexibility we've been discussing with some of these past couple cards. But it's 2 mana for a 2/2 flyer, which is already great. If you play this on turn 2, you can hit your opponent for like 6 or sometimes even 8 damage with this card before they can get a blocker that can deal with it by playing like a big dragon or something like that, unless they kill it. And then it has, whenever a card leaves your graveyard during your turn, draw a card. It only triggers once each turn, but it can get you card advantage. So it's a 2 mana 2/2 flyer that can get you card advantage, and that's just fantastic. There are cards like Harmonize cards, which can leave your graveyard. There are cards with Renew abilities that can leave your graveyard. There are also other cards that just return cards from your graveyard to your hand, or exile cards from graveyards, and all of those will trigger the Kishla Skimmer, and that is fantastic. If it draws you a single card, you've gotten a 2/2 flyer for 2 that drew you a card. If it draws you multiple cards, it's pretty much game winning. And overall, this is a card that you should be taking very highly. Next is Knockout Maneuver, a simple removal spell, 2 and a green for a sorcery. Put a +1/+1/+ counter on target creature you control, then it deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. Removal spells that leave you with a lasting advantage are really, really nice. So the fact that this leaves you with a +1/+1 counter on your creature means that your opponent now has to deal with a creature that is now permanently larger, which is really, really nice. You just have to be a tiny bit careful with this card because it is a sorcery. So if your opponent has mana open for a buff spell or for a removal spell of their own to cast in response to Knockout Maneuver, you can get a little bit wrecked. So make sure you're mostly casting this card when your opponent's tapped out, or you're basically sure they don't have something to do at instant speed. But other than that, this card is fantastic. You can just play this at any stage of the game, it's going to be good. If you play this with your 2-drop to kill their 3-drop or something like that, all of a sudden you have a big creature earlier on in the game. If you play it in the late game, you have a removal spell that can take care of lots of different things because you'll have bigger creatures to kill bigger threats, so you can get a mana advantage. Overall, Knockout Maneuver is a really, really good card that you should be taking highly. Finally, we have Glacial Dragon Hunt. So for blue-red, you get a sorcery that says draw a card, then you may discard a card. When you discard a non-land card this way, Glacial Dragon Hunt deals 3 damage to target creature, and then it has Harmonize for 4 blue-red. Now, an important element of this card is that the discard part is a May ability. So if your opponent doesn't have any creatures in play, you can just cast this for 2 mana to draw a card, and then you can flash it back with the Harmonize mode to just draw another card. So that would just get you up a card because you drew a card the first mode, you flashed it back from the graveyard, drew another card, you're up a card, you got some card advantage, you can be happy. Now, If you do have the ability to use this as a removal spell, that's going to be beneficial to you if you have cards you want to discard from your hand or weaker cards, because that is going to be a pretty nice removal spell. 2 mana to deal 3, or flashback as a way to deal 3 to creatures. Oftentimes you'll have a card that's maybe a little bit expensive for the current game state. You might just need to get it out of your hand and use it to deal the 3 damage. There's also sometimes situations where you have cards that are only good in more narrow situations, so a counter spell that is maybe no longer relevant because your opponent has the mana available to pay for the counter spell, or things like that. You can just discard those to kill your opponent's threats. And then sometimes you just have weaker cards in your deck. So the cards that were the last couple additions to your deck, you can just discard those ones away and turn them into deal 3 damage to opposing creatures. The fact that you gain access to this as a harmonized card as well is also great, because if you happen to mill it into your graveyard or discard it to some other effect, then you still get to cast the harmonized part, which is really, really good. Overall, this card fits great into any blue-red deck, and is a card you should be taking very highly. That's going to do it for this video, though. I do hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. If you did make it to the end, remember to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe for more, comment with your questions, thoughts, and feedback, and leave hashtag 10wins in the comment section to let me know you made it all the way to the end of the video, because these cards are winners and they will help you win more games. Anyway, that's going to do it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you next time.